We will now go ahead and begin our media availabilities. We are joined by Kyle Busch, driver of the number 18 Interstate Batteries Toyota for Joe Gibbs Racing. We'll go ahead and open it up to the media for questions. Please raise your hand and we'll get a mic over to you. We'll go in the back to Pat and then up to the front to Nate.
Pat Nicola, NASCAR.com. Yesterday you tweeted a picture of you and Brexton from Victory Lane here from a couple of years ago where the lobster was bigger than Brexton. So I'm curious, like, how you look at your career now is like the pre-Brexton era to now and how maybe you've changed.
Don't know that I've ever necessarily looked at a pre-Brexton era and a post, but yeah, since there's something else that kind of happened around that same time frame, and that was Adam Stevens. So, you know, I think just having the opportunities to work with him and to have the communications that we have from, you know, the Xfinity side that transferred to the Cup side since 2015. But also, yeah, you know, since having Brexton, there's been, you know, some good success as well, too. Championship in 2015, certainly would have liked to have won a couple more. We've been in the championship 4 years in a row, but can't seem to close out the deal when it matters most in the final race, the only race that counts. So, you know, we just got to keep fighting for that and trying to get better and making sure that we're ready to go when it comes down that time.
We'll come down here to Nate and then to Jeff.
Nate Ryan, NBC Sports. Kyle, a lot of concerns about the heat with the way that the cars are sealed off with the right side windows, the engine bay, the brake heat, I would think, at a place like this. Are you expecting it to be bad Sunday with temperatures in the mid-90s? It will be worse in traffic, and how will you deal with it?
No, there's nothing I'm going to do to change it, so the hotter the better. Bring it. You know, I've been working my ass off for 2 years for days like this, so let's go.
Can you explain, like, is it because of the way that the right side's sealed off and stuff underneath is sort of sealed off with a bigger pan? Is that sort of why it's?
It's just, I mean, it's hot outside. There's this whole thing called global warming that we're all either aware of or not very aware of, however you want to interpret that. But no, I mean, with the race cars, they're hot things anyways, you know? I mean, exhaust temperatures are in the thousands of degrees. Your engine temperatures are running hotter now than they've ever run before. So you've got the underbody, with our cars being sealed off closer to the ground, there's less airflow underneath the cars, so it kind of just gets heat soaked. And you can definitely feel those things throughout the course of the day. Like when you get in the car and you strap in and you put your helmet on, everything's kind of cool, like you feel okay. And then as the race progresses and you have long green flag runs, everything heat soaks and gets up to temperature. That's when you start to feel the hottest. So, you know, right side windows being in there, yeah, that doesn't help things. They give us a NACA that we're able to have, but obviously the crew chiefs say it's better to have that closed off. So we're allowed dampeners on our hoses, and so we run them closed all the time. You know, so it's just do what we're told to do and suffer the consequences, I guess.
We'll go to Jeff and then to the front to Lee.
Jeff Clark from The Athletic. Kyle, I'm going to expose my total ignorance here, but I don't understand the effect of the heat on the PJ1. So, like, does that pick it up faster? Does it activate it more? Like, how will that affect things during the race?
Yeah, so if it was cold outside, let's say it was in the, you know, 50s or something here, you know, track temp being probably in the 70s or something, it would take a little bit for that to get burn in, for it to get warmed up, for it to activate, for it to become stickier, you know. I guess the best explanation I can give you is, this is going against code for Mars, but Jolly Rancher, right? Like if it's a cold Jolly Rancher, it's probably sticky, but it's not that sticky. When it gets hot, right, you leave it inside the cockpit of your car, it's going to be really sticky. That's essentially the comparison I have. So that's kind of how I look at it. So the warmer it is, I guess, you know, it'll be sticky for a while, and then once it gets, if there might even be a time in which it's too hot, then it's just slimy. You know what I mean? So I don't think we'll see that here this weekend, though. I think that stuff's pretty good.
Does it pick it up, though? Like
it wears it away, yeah. So the rubber of the tire, as you're running on it, you know, they spray it, and then they burn it in with the tire dragon, whatever. And then as we run across it, like last week, you can kind of see us taking away the black that it leaves when they first put it down, and it turns into a sheen, like it's kind of like taking it away, like it's just wearing it away. So it kind of polishes it, per se.
We'll go to Lee and then to Matt in the middle.
Lee Spencer, RacingBoards.com. Was there anything out of the ordinary that happened to Hamlin before he wrecked the car that you know of, or have you been briefed on it?
No.
Okay, and headed to Pocono next week after you were there earlier last month, do you feel like you have a good notebook with the new car configuration that you can take back and be successful with?
I'd like to think so. You know, we were pretty good there last time. There were a couple guys that were as fast as we were. It was kind of hard to pass in certain situations. There was some unique opportunities on restarts that didn't really seem to present itself that we all expected it to. But past all that, you know, for as good as we were, we're now going back with the PJ1 being sprayed on lane 2 in all 3 corners, lane 2 and 3, I guess, in all 3 corners. So that'll be a different variable than we've had there in the past, and we'll just have to play it all out and see what happens when we get there. And typically at those places, like any mile and a half that we go to where you have to get out of the gas just a little bit, it seems like us, 18, the Gibbs cars, whatever, we can run okay with those guys. But anywhere that we go that you have to run wide open, like all the way around, like Kansas or Chicago, we sort of struggle, and there's some other teams that are better than us. But like California, we were super fast because you had to get out of the gas and play with it some. And then Pocono was that same way, so we were really fast there. So I feel good about that, at least, going back.
How do you think the PJ1's going to affect that?
Affect what exactly?
Just Pocono, the different lanes there.
Yeah. I don't know if it will. I mean, you would like to think that it's going to present more opportunities to just get out of the guy in front of you's wake. I think what we're expecting it to do is if you go off into the corner and you follow somebody, you have to lose ground to them in order to maintain the same line that they're running. You can't gain on them following them. You have less downforce. You're just not going to make that time. So if you can offset yourself wider than them and you can at least maintain that gap and you can come off the corner kind of with a little bit of a momentum from the high side that it typically gives you, then you can make a run on the straightaways and you have a chance to be able to race with the guy that you're following, and you don't just have to be stuck behind him. So that's the theory anyways. We'll see how that works.
We'll go right here.
Matthew Wernes with 22 News. Kyle, I wanted to ask you, I know a lot of the Cup drivers have said over time that the modified rubber, when you guys go out for practice, affects the track a little bit. Did it affect your car this morning?
Yeah, it always does. It just, you know, I guess sometimes if you're loose, you get looser. If you're tight, you get tighter. It just kind of depends. It just seems like it's a little bit greasier of a feel to fire off with. And as that burns off, or as we pull that rubber off and put our rubber down, you know, I wouldn't say it necessarily picks up grip. It just becomes more constant and consistent. So, you know, we've got Xfinity cars right now wearing some PJ1 off, and then you're going to have a modified race, then you're going to have Xfinity cars again, then we have our qualifying. So I expect our qualifying to be slower than what we were in practice. And then I'm sure they'll probably reapply either tonight or maybe even tomorrow after the Xfinity race.
Go right to the back.
Mike Cronin, WMUR. Kyle, could you talk about being back in New Hampshire? What do you think of the Motor Speedway here, and how do you approach this track?
Yeah, I love coming up here. I've got a lot of friends from the area. I've raced over at Thunder Road before. I've raced over at Oxford before, so I've been around this area a little bit, racing in the short tracks and stuff. So a few of those friends come on over here sometimes and visit a little bit, so that's good. But yeah, I enjoy coming to New Hampshire. This has been a pretty successful place for us. We tend to qualify well here, race well here. We've won here a couple times. We've been kind of the car to beat, one of the guys to beat here, I think about, I don't know, the last 2, 3, 4 years maybe. And, you know, sometimes guys really, really hit on it and they're better than us, and we're always consistently good here. So hopefully we can keep that pattern going at least and be consistently good here again, but maybe we can hit on it better than somebody else and try to win.
We'll come right down here to the front.
Hi, Kyle. Terrell Covey with Portsmouth Herald. I'm just wondering, you mentioned, you know, racing at Oxford, racing at Thunder Road, and Christopher Bell was up there this week. You know, for you guys to come to these local tracks, especially on race weekend, and kind of serve as almost as kind of ambassadors to NASCAR, these short tracks, you know, why do you do that, and why do you think that's important?
Well, I think it's important to be able to have a strong foundation. You know, our sport is based off the short track ranks. It's based off grassroots racing, and so having people be able to come out and support their local short tracks, that's where stars are born. You know, they pick up their start, whether it's in Legends cars or Bandoleros or go-karts or whatever it might be, and move into modifieds and late models and stuff from the local short tracks all the way up through to the big time. So if we don't have those short tracks surviving, you're not going to have younger generations being able to learn and grow and develop their talents into being able to move up the ladder. So it's important to keep the basis strong. And I know Kevin Harvick is very passionate about it. Myself, you know, some of these other guys. I know Larson does a lot of the dirt stuff. Denny Hamlin's had his charity race a few times at some of his favorite local short tracks that he's grown up at. So it's good to have those guys that still kind of give back to that community and know where we all got our start.
Go to the back.
Paul Lambert from Short Track Scene. Kyle, you just mentioned your love for short track racing. Would you ever think about hopping in one of these modifieds here and giving that a shot?
No. No. Deal behind that was years ago I asked, I wanted to run one, and J.D. Gibbs told me no. So I've respected his wishes and haven't asked to run a modified race here. I'd like to. I'd do it, but I just respect his wishes. If they ran the late models here when we were here for a weekend, I'd probably bring my late model up and run the late model race, you know, because I'm used to those cars. I've run those cars a long time, and I've run at the Milwaukee Mile before, so it'd be cool to run here.
Are there any final questions for Kyle? We'll go to Lee, and that'll wrap it up.
Curtis often told me that the fact that Tom ran you guys in so many different varieties of racing growing up really helped you become complete drivers. Do you agree with his assessment?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, if I had to do it over again, I would do a lot of the same stuff. And matter of fact, there's probably a couple more things that I'd like to get in and drive that I never did get the chance to drive. You know, and I do actually kind of have that chance to do over again. That's if my son wants to do it. Put him in some stuff and run some quarter midgets I never ran. You know, I don't know if we need to do the go-kart thing, but, you know, get into the Legends cars again, the Bandoleros, stuff like that, modifieds. And by doing all of those things, like Legends, we ran pavement and dirt and road course. Modifieds, we ran pavement and dirt. Late models, we ran pavement. We could have run late models on dirt. We just never knew of anybody. We couldn't afford that. So we never knew of anybody that we could get in a late model car. They weren't really that popular out west, but they're really popular out here. And obviously running super lates and stuff like that across the country in different series is pretty neat. Seeing different guys racing against different top guys that have been at some of these places for years, like Mike Rowe up here, or the other one's passing my mind right now. Why can't I think of it? Shaw. You know, guys like that, and you know, going and run Junior Hanley, you know, running against guys like that is something that was cool for me to do when I was 16, 17 years old, and you know, you'd give anything to have those days back and do that over again.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Kyle. Good
All right,
luck
cool.
this weekend.
Thanks.
We will now go ahead and continue our media availabilities. We are now joined by Kurt Busch, driver of the #1 Monster Energy Chevrolet for Chip Ganassi Racing. Thanks for joining us, Kurt.
Thank you.
We'll go ahead and open it up for questions. Please raise your hand and we will get a mic over to you. We'll start with Pat and then go to Nate.
Pat Nicola, NASCAR.com. When's the last time in your career that you remember having this much fun behind the wheel?
It's always funny, like when people are telling different stories and they're like, yeah, you know, back in the day when it was fun. And I've been trying to remind everybody or just influence the fact that, no, this is right now and this is fun. It wasn't more fun then. We'll look back on this and go, yeah, it takes time for things to settle in and sink in. But no, for me, when I first came into the series, you know, 22-year-old kid from Vegas, had to cut my way through some pretty heavy areas, you know, to make it to the top. And you're still nervous that you don't know if you're going to make it stick or make it to where you're going to be around for a long while. And, you know, I had a blast with every team, and it's just a matter of keeping it competitive and at that top edge. And, you know, over the years, it just feels like the older I get, the easier it is to accept some of the tougher days and then to enjoy the big days with more of a excitement, more of a passion, and more fun. And yeah, it's tough though, because like early on, Mark Martin's like, hey, you're gonna have some good days, you're gonna have some bad days. Just try to draw a nice line and keep it there. And ever since I met Ashley, there is no bad days, and everything is up here for excitement and fun. And yes, I would say that right now, just with Monster and with Chip Ganassi and everything that's going on, It's a blast. You know, each week is fun because there's speed to be found and there's teamwork to work on to make sure that we're going to have the best weekend. And it brings me back to that passion and that desire when I was younger to go out there each week and try to make sure we're getting the most out of each session.
We'll go to Nate.
Nate Ryan, NBC Sports. Kurt, after the race, Dale Jarrett asked you last week about where you guys need to improve, and you said that you felt like you need to get better on short tracks and lower grip tracks, and you also said, kind of, I think, lobbying maybe the team, hey, let's invest in getting better on these tracks. Would this be a place like that? And were the comments well received? I mean, do you feel like the team is maybe putting an extra effort in now that you won and have qualified for the playoffs?
Yeah, I feel like a few weeks back we were leading into the halfway point, and I left some bullet points with some of the top engineers and management on this category or this category and that category. And then with the way that Daytona went for us, where it was so close to a win, but yet, okay, what else do we need to position ourselves better to be closer to wins? That's when some other bullet points from other engineers popped up, and Larson's evaluation of where he feels the 42 car is. And yes, that has opened up more talks about building, different style cars for different style tracks instead of just trying to use a 1.5 mile style car for a short track. There's things that Gibbs is doing. There's things that Penske's doing, and we have to apply it the best way that we can. And some of it's through the motivation of Chip Ganassi, Rob Kaufman, and Felix Sabates to get it to that A++ level. And so I think it's been well received, and you can't just completely tip over the apple cart mid-season, especially when things are going good, but it's looking ahead to the future and what we can do to make sure that we make the best playoff run this year and look at things for 2020 and beyond. Yeah, to finish your question, like this is a short track, low grip. This is where if we have a good run this weekend, then we have turned a good corner. If we struggle a little bit, it shows that this is that weakness for us, and we have to get that fixed.
We'll go to Jeff and then over to Lee.
I may have missed it, Kurt, if you said somewhere this weekend, but how did you end up getting home last week? The Ganassi team plane, they reserve seats on Victory Air. I think there's 6 or 7 Challenger 80s or whatever they are for planes. So there's like 6 different crew member planes that a bunch of guys jump on. And so they held us, and we got on. I think there was maybe 3 or 4 seats left on the whole plane itself. And so Ashley and I jumped on that plane, and we got home around 4:15 a.m.
Go down to Lee.
Lee Spencer, RacingVoice.com. You mentioned looking at 2020 and beyond, and after the race, you said on Monday you were going to start looking at contracts and things of that nature. Have you started the ball rolling? Because I get the indication you have no desire to go anywhere.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if I'm driving in 2020 and beyond. It would be what I'd want to do to help a program or to give my knowledge and to be part of a team and to make things work here for 2019 and continue to improve whether I'm driving or I'm not to help all of Ganassi. And it's just a matter of if I'm driving or if I'm not, I'm still going to do my job to make sure that we're progressing and pushing towards the future on what I believe is important and what they want to do to apply it and what they believe is important and what I have to listen to.
But it doesn't sound like you have any intention of stop driving. I mean, that's kind of my point. I mean, you just don't seem like you're ready to make that move.
Well, you're asking me all these fun questions when everything's on a high, when everything is great, and we're coming out of victory lane and having fun, scavenging rides home, and just living at the top level. And so we'll see how things all piece together. I don't have all the full answers, but things are all pointing in the right direction to be teamed up together and to continue to race and to win races and to run at a championship. I mean, I haven't thought about it other than through your question, but if I'm able to make a run at the championship this year and win it overall, that could change things as well, and that wouldn't happen until the week of Thanksgiving.
And looking ahead to Pocono, they're going to use the PJ1 there. Learning what you did with the new car and the configuration the last time that we went there, how do you think it's going to change the complexion of racing when we return?
Yeah, I think it will definitely help with creating different lanes and being able to produce a lap time not in the optimum groove. That's been the tough part about Pocono and some of the other tracks. The optimum groove is utilized, and that's where the best lap time comes from. Therefore, there's not a lot of passing for the lead. If we can create a second lane or a third option and be able to run a really good lap time as the second or third place guy, then you have a chance at passing the leader. So I think it's a good option to try out, and you have to commend the tracks and Goodyear and NASCAR and the drivers all working together to find the best product.
Go to Reed, and then we'll come right down here.
Reed Spencer with NASCAR Wire Service. Starting with Newman in 2002, Jimmy in 2003, you in 2004. There are 6 drivers in the field this week that have 3 wins each at this track through various generations of race cars. What is it about this place? Is it a feel that you get that carries through all of that time and all the rule changes and lets you continue to be successful?
Yeah, there's certain tracks that when you find a nice setup, that it stays hot for a while, and you're able to use it the next time you come back because not much changed, whether it's been aero or the tires. I remember in '04 when I swept the 2 races here, the second race had a lot of weather issues, and we didn't get a lot of practice time, so we were all forced to use the setup that we used at the first race, and so that helped us as a race-winning team be able to sweep the races that year. You know, this track's similar a bit to Bristol. If you find that right setup, it works for a little bit.
Bob Bianchi, WSMN. Every team you've gone to, you've really raised their bar, even some teams that were struggling. What is it about you, in your own mind, what is it about you that you're able to do that no matter where you go, no matter what team it is, you're able to bring them up?
I appreciate that. I started out racing with my dad, and when I was with my dad, we didn't have a big racing budget. We were just kind of scraping it together, and he taught me a lot about communication, and he would ask me so many questions. You know, as a 16-year-old, I felt frustrated, like, really, I got to analyze the car this much? And he goes, well, if you do that, it makes my job easier to help you with the setup. And so when you learn from an early age and a successful racer like my dad was, it gets instilled in you on how to communicate the proper things with the car, and it gives you that confidence to know what you want changed in the car and to help. And then there's days where it can hurt, though, where I'm so confident in what I know I want with the car and the crew chief didn't get it to me, that there's that frustration with it. And so it's a matter of trying to help the crew chief and the engineering and pit crew, everybody. I just want their jobs to be easier, because if their jobs are easier, they're doing better, and ultimately the car that I'm driving will have better results.
We'll come back down here to Pat.
Pat DeCola, NASCAR.com. You sort of mentioned that the title scenario might impact how you race next year, or like if you are racing next year. Can you imagine a better scenario than kind of riding off into the sunset like that? And like, if you won the championship, what would bring you back next year?
It's always hard to play what if. I don't want to put too much ahead of it, and it would be the ultimate scenario, right? John Elway style Super Bowl win, and with everything that's been accomplished in my career, that's what's allowed me to also have more fun. I've got a lot of boxes checked off. You know, even last year to get my first ever super speedway pole at Talladega last October, not a lot of guys would put much emphasis in that category, but it's like, all right, now I have a pole on short tracks, road courses, intermediates, and a super speedway pole finally. That's what's made this fun. And so what would bring me back is if like Monster Energy, Global Poker, Gear Wrench, and everybody's putting together their advertising campaign and how they want to push to sell more product, that's where it would hit home for me here. And then I would react to what we want to do together to make sure everybody's feeling the benefits, selling more stuff, having more fun at the track, and ultimately, you know, for me, I would then be approaching 42, 43 years old, and there's a lot of young talent out there, and it would be like that chance to maybe pick the guy, the girl that's going to come up and drive after I'm done racing. It's a good question. Another championship, ultimately. More playoff wins. And again, the last few years, I haven't led a lot of laps in races, and I want to lead some more laps and be up front. And so, I don't know. I don't know the exact boxes. Maybe I need to reevaluate real quick, and I'll get back to you.
We'll take a last question in the back right there.
Kyle, Kurt. Terrell Covey with the Portsmouth Herald. I just wanted to ask you. You just mentioned racing with your dad, and you and your brother coming up through, and from that experience to where you were at Kentucky with one another. I'm sure you've talked about this before, but talk a little bit about how important family is still in racing, even when you get to the level where you're at now.
I would say 90% of everybody that's made it to this top cup level, and if you're a winner, it helped with the way you got here by family. Family is what really helps keep the drive alive, so to speak, with the travel that it takes to go when you're first starting out, the money that it takes, because racing is very different than stick and ball sports, where you have to have the extra money for sets of tires and the fuel and crash damage and things that it takes. And so the time and investment from a set of parents, that's something that Kyle and I are very grateful for. Our mom and dad didn't sacrifice much, and we went to the track with as little and as much as we could and made the best of it. And Dad was there to teach me. I felt like I was there to teach Kyle, along with my dad teaching Kyle. And it was really neat. Like, I was racing late models, struggling in college, and didn't know how far I'd get because Mom's like, man, you probably need to get a real job. This racing thing is really starting to take over your life, but we're almost out of money. And yet my little brother was just starting out at the age of 12 in legend cars, and I just wanted to help him as much as I could. And so family's always been there. It's great to race Kyle at this top level. I always have to remind people a lot, Kyle and I didn't race against each other much when we were kids, is because we're 7 years apart. So anytime I was bumping up in a racing division, he was never there racing until we got ultimately to this Monster Energy Cup Series level. And so this is where we've had the most races against one another. And so that's the family side. It's still there. It's fun. It's like the Williams sisters in tennis competing against each other. They're not out there every week against each other. The Manning brothers in football, they occasionally have a game against each other, but it's not all the time. Kyle and I got to deal with each other a lot, and that's why it's no sweat for him to drop me on a plane ride, because I'm going to see him the next week, and I can give him some flack for it. And so it's really fun. The family aspect, the team aspect, and everything that goes into all this, there's a lot to it. And back to Pat's question, I checking boxes off of the Southern 500 I've yet to win, and I've yet to win at Indianapolis. Those are the top two, and if I can find a third for my trifecta, I want to win at Watkins Glen really bad.
All right. Thank you, Kurt. Good luck this weekend.
Thank you.
We'll go ahead and continue our media availabilities with Kevin Harvick, driver of the number 4 Busch Beer National Forest Foundation Ford for Stewart-Haas Racing. Thanks for joining us, Kevin.
No problem. Thank you.
We'll go ahead and open it up for questions. If you have one, please raise your hand and we'll get to you. We'll start over here to the right.
Hi, Kevin. Rich Thompson, Boston Herald. You've won 2 of the last 4 here. How did it all come together for you on this track so quickly?
Well, it's just like anything else. I can probably tell you the ones that we lost and felt like we should have won. And last year, our car came around at the end of the race. We had a decent car all weekend, but we, capitalized on, some mistakes and a good car at the end of the race. So we've had a good car here a number of times. Just, last year it finally all came together.
We'll come down here to Reed.
Reed Spencer, NASCAR Wire. It's sort of a follow-up to that. You're one of 6 guys in the field that has won here 3 times, often many years apart. Is there a feel that you developed for this track that sort of transcends types of cars and rule changes and that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, I think, racing is a lot like other sports. You go through spells of capitalizing on things and having good cars and mediocre cars and circumstances, and I think that, you know, part of the sport is those streaks come and go, and at certain racetracks, you know, at RCR we had a lot of good flat track races at Richmond and Loudon, and we only won here one time, and I thought this was one of our better tracks. So, you know, I think as you look at different racetracks, you know, I feel like we've always run fairly well here. I feel like we probably should have been to victory lane 10 times here. But, you know, you look at the results, and it's just hard to win these races. But, you know, over the last few years, obviously it's gone okay, and we've been on the right side of it.
Any other questions? Go to Lee.
SpencerRacingBoys.com. Wanted to ask you, they're putting PJ1 down on Pocono next weekend. How do you think that will affect the racing there? And did you learn anything with the new configuration of the car that you and Rodney can take back next weekend?
Well, our car was extremely fast there last time, and the steering box broke. You know, so, you know, I feel like we had a lot to build on. For us individually as an organization and team, you know, we're still trying to recover from not being where we needed to be to start the season. So the progression for us has been rapid. You know, there's been a lot of different things that have been tried as we've gone over these last 2 months, and you know, we're still building and trying to get the cars, you know, exactly where we'd like them to be. But Pocono was definitely a race we could have won, you know, with the circumstances going right. And it seems like excuse me, it seems like on the days where we've had chances to win, we've just either made mistakes or we've you know, had something go wrong. So, you know, it's probably been 3 or 4, maybe 5 times this year that we've had those opportunities and just haven't capitalized on them. But Pocono was definitely one of those races. I feel like, you know, we've been able to hopefully make the car better than it was last time. I think we've done that every week. So, you know, I think as you go there with PJ1, a lot of that came from, you know, the meeting at Daytona with communication from the drivers and NASCAR and everybody, you know, trying to figure out how to make the racing better there. And with these particular cars and the way that passing has been so difficult, you know, lanes are a good option, you know, for all of us to make the racing better. So, you know, I think from the outside looking in, the race is okay to watch. From inside the car, it's a little bit frustrating just because of how difficult it has been to pass at some of the racetracks. So I think with as much better as we are as a sport in adding the PJ1 at a lot of these racetracks and seeing the results that I mean, it was way better at Kentucky than it had been in the past. You look at this particular racetrack in Bristol, we've just done a lot better job, and you look at the science that goes into when you spray it, how you spray it, all the things that come into play. The long and short of the story is we've just become a lot better at the traction compound and the things that we do and when we put it down and where we put it down. And you see a lot more people open to it because it's more consistent. And we need lanes as drivers in order to go where the other car isn't in order to pass. And you know, I think that's really the reasoning behind Pocono. And you see them spray it all the way to the wall here. And you know, you saw it was better last week at Kentucky. It didn't get all the way up, but it at least gave you an option outside of the preferred bottom lane. And so, you know, I think we're making gains on it as a sport, and it'll be interesting because you never know how far out on the straightaway you need it, how far up you need it, and you just have to do it. And I think this will be a good step.
As spectators, we've seen the entertainment value with the intermediate tracks at an all-time high. I mean, certainly a lot better. They're producing better races than we've seen in quite a while. Looking at the Gen 7 car, is there a lot that we need to change for that particular intermediate track package, do you think, when we look at 2020?
Well, I think, you know, I think a lot of it is just drivability, and I think that's everybody's focus right now is just drivability in traffic to make the driver more useful in the car. I think everybody knows that, and everybody's working on that, and I think that's one reason that the PJ1 is such a necessity, and everybody's been so open to it because you just want to make it better. So yes, I would agree that the mile and a halves are better to watch for sure, especially if we have cautions.
We'll come right down here to the left and then go over to Jeff.
Hi, Kevin. Terrell Covey with the Portsmouth Herald. You've been a strong advocate for drivers kind of going to the grassroots tracks and getting out there. And we had Christopher Bell up in Vermont this weekend. Could you talk a little bit about why you're so passionate about that and what you think the benefits of drivers getting out to these tracks are?
Well, one, it's awareness. Two, it's in my opinion, and this is really how the conversation started when this kind of took off a couple years ago at Phoenix and after the race. I think that the biggest reason to me is the fact that Winston used to cover a lot of the expenses and shortfalls that a lot of these short tracks had, and when Winston went away, and that's connection between the Winston Racing Series and the Winston Cup Series started to separate through the years, and it took time for that to dwindle, and racing has changed, and you don't have that same short track connection that you had. So in my opinion, that's where a lot of the grassroots fans live, and I feel like there's been a huge disconnect over the last 5 or 6 years of participation from what's happening here and what's happening there. And really, I've said this a number of times, running the K&N races, a few years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, really, you really started to hear that opinion of, we just need some help here. And, you hear so many race fans talk about, they don't like when this driver comes and runs this series or that series, but the competitors actually do like it, because it brings attention to their series. Attention to their series brings more people to the stands. More people in the stands brings more value to a sponsorship. So, for us, we've had a lot of success with our short track series contingency programs. I think we have 3 of them now. We have, one in the Spears SRL series. We have one at Stafford Speedway, and then we have one with, Bill McAnally and his track in California. So it's you're talking about 125 to 150 bucks at a time, but when you can take the 13th place driver like we do at Stafford and make him make the same money as the 6th or 7th place driver, that's a pretty big deal, to that guy who's running mid-pack, struggling to get to the racetrack, and maybe he paid for 1 or 2 tires that night, and so it's you're not talking about a lot of money. I tell a lot of people this when we deal with our foundations and the things that we do at our public high schools, especially at home. It doesn't take a lot of money, and some of it just takes time. And so the short tracks to me has a direct effect on TV ratings, fans in the grandstands, especially in the local market, and you see a lot of these racetracks participating with their local markets and whether they're dirt tracks or asphalt tracks or whatever it may be, and drawing all that together is important for the health of the sport and racing in general.
We'll go to Jeff, over here to Mike, and then we'll wrap up in the back.
Jeff Gluck from The Athletic. Kevin, the way you guys race now, you guys are driving each other down to the apron the entire race, not just at the end. All over the track, side drafting, all this stuff. When did that start? I feel like it wasn't that way 10 years ago, unless I'm wrong.
You're not. Yeah. If you'd have drove like this 10 years ago, you'd have had a fist in your mouth. But
so when did this all change? I guess it changed rapidly at some point, but I don't know what changed or how.
Well, what changed were the rules, and when every spot becomes that much more difficult to achieve, you have to defend the spots that you have because you know that you might not get it back, and that you have to. Blocking is a part of what we do. Defending your position is a part of what we do, and it's just an evolution of where the rules package is. And heck, I had a blown motor last week, broken engine, and was only 0.3 off the pace. So you're talking about small amounts of time, and especially on the mile and a half racetracks where, if you can keep somebody behind you and that comes with side drafting and blocking and all those things that if they're directly behind you, there's no way they'll pass you because of the arrow.
Right down here to the right.
Mike Cronin, WMUR. Kevin, I know it's the middle of summer, but at least for New Englanders, this is by far the hottest weather we've had. Does the heat play any factor in how you approach the race this weekend?
You know, I think it'll come into play a little bit with the handling of the car. You know, I think as you look at it, I always look forward to coming up here because it's always the cooler portion of the summer stretch. And the last couple of years, we've gone to Chicago and you know, you come here and those have been our hottest races as we've gone through the summer. So it's you know, it's definitely the heat for us inside the car is not going to be something that's abnormal this time of year. For the fans, it's going to be abnormal in this portion of the country. But you know, I think as you look at it, it'll be interesting to see where the grooves go and how the cars fall off, because I think handling will be a little bit more difficult with the temperatures up like they will be.
We'll go ahead and wrap up with this last question.
Rich Thompson, Boston Herald. Just talk about team continuity with Rodney that you've had over the years.
Yeah, you know, I think, you know, where you see that really come into play, especially, you know, this year when things didn't get started off well, we've had things not go 100% right. You know, you have that connection and that communication to, you know, to be able to productively work on things and keep things moving in the right direction. And we've definitely done that. We haven't been to victory lane, but we've, you know, slowly but surely progressed in the right directions. And that's really where you see that continuity and that relationship and experience as a group together pay off.
All right. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks.
Good luck this weekend. We're going to go ahead and continue our media availabilities. We are now joined by Joey Logano, driver of the number 22 AAA Insurance Ford for Team Penske. Thanks for joining us, Joey.
Thank you.
We'll go ahead and open it up for questions. Please raise your hand and we'll get to you with a mic. We'll start right here on the left and then go to Nate.
Terrell Covey with the Portsmouth Herald. Joey, you obviously got your first win here, and now, though, you're coming home as a champion for the first time. What does that feel like, and how have you been received this week?
Yeah, it's actually been, I didn't really think about it before I got here much, because you're kind of thinking about how do you win here. And I went out this morning for the Champions Breakfast that Speedway Children's Charities does every year, and you know, to see some of the support there. And I guess that's when it kind of hit me. It's kind of cool to come home for the first time, or at least a home track for the first time since we won the championship. And that's been pretty neat so far. I'm looking forward to Sunday. This is always a fun race for us, but especially because just the support that you know, my team gets and I get here. You know, at home, it's cool. I always say I feel like Dale Jr. here because there's so much 22 gear and you know, a lot of New England race fans rooting for their hometown guy. So that's a pretty special, neat feeling.
Go ahead, Nate.
Nate Ryan, NBC Sports. Joey, on NASCAR America on Monday, they reviewed the final restart in Kentucky and pretty much said there was nothing you could do. So I wonder, when you look back at that, do you feel that way? And you know, in this current era of lower horsepower and having to block like both lanes and the drafting style racing now, I mean, is it even being leader with lane choice? Is it sometimes not an advantage?
It was a perfect storm, really. I mean, the lineup of that restart, I don't really know what I could have done a whole bunch better. There's one thing I think I could have done a little better. There's a lot of what ifs in my mind. None of them have the outcome of me winning, I don't believe. Some of them have an outcome of maybe better than, you know, 5th or 7th. Maybe I could still squeak out a top 3 out of it. But you know, I mean, it just the way the lineup was with teammates on the inside, teammates behind me, that was a tough spot. It just seems like in today's world, with the less horsepower like that, you know, you're side drafting way earlier than what we used to. You know, we used to start side drafting maybe off the corner in turn 2, but now we're going back and forth because we have a longer period of time from the restart zone to turn 1, or really until when you lift. You don't lift until you get to turn 3 now, so you have way more time and distance that you're wide open and side drafting back and forth. And if cars can get behind you with a big push, like the two Ganassi cars did, and that on top of getting slowed down by the 18 on the side draft, that they were coming at me 5 mile an hour quicker or so, and I couldn't stop it. I just had to pick a lane and hope for the best that someone was going to save me. But just, I guess it was frustrating because we had the race won, basically. I mean, it was over. We were far enough ahead, and then that happens. That always stings, right? But that's why there's next week all the time. But I'm not really sure if I could have done anything to successfully win the race. But I think there might have been one or two things I could have done to, I don't know, stop the bleeding a little bit sooner.
We'll come down here to Lee.
Lee Spencer, RacingBoys.com. Todd said he had the car set up for long runs, and when you commit to something like that, is there anything you can do in the position you're at to, I guess, negate how severely it's set up for a long run and make it, kind of sort of a short run car when you need it to be?
Yeah, I mean, we had it set up to run the long haul, and it showed how good we were in the long haul. I mean, the first run went pretty long, and we started driving up through the field. I feel like if it went the full stage, we would have been to the lead. But and then the last run obviously was a pretty long run with a green flag cycle, and then boom, drove to the lead, and that whole theory was working out really good. We don't have the opportunity to change anything because we didn't come back down pit road. There's the typical maybe air pressure and maybe fuel load, things like that maybe you can adjust a little bit to help your car fire off quicker on a late race restart. But there was never the opportunity for us to come down pit road. If we pitted there with a green-white checker from the lead, we would have came out like 15th. I don't think anyone was going to pit.
Can the driver do anything? I mean, or are you just pot committed at that point?
You're pretty committed, yeah. It's a decision that we made as a team beforehand, and it looked like it was going to work until it didn't. But I don't think we went the wrong way with it. The race just didn't play the way we thought it would.
And did you guys learn a lot going to Pocono the first time that you can take back when we go next week? And how will the PJ1 affect the complexion of that racetrack now?
We definitely learned a lot in Pocono. I feel like we made a lot of mistakes, and I feel like we learned a lot from that. So I don't see mistakes as such a negative thing. I kind of think it's a positive because we learned from a lot of them. And with the PJ1, that'll change some things. I still think what we learned is valuable. But yeah, the groove will probably move around. Things will be different. It might come back a little bit like when they had that paved section with the old asphalt there. I don't know, we used to call it the grip strip, but I don't know, call it whatever you want. But it may kind of play that way a little bit more like it used to. So I think that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm kind of excited about getting back there. Kudos to Pocono and NASCAR on that one, though. I mean, try something, right? I think it was, maybe not one of our best races, and I think that was probably well documented afterwards. And let's try something to make it better. And I think honestly, this traction compound that we've been laying down at these racetracks has not hurt. I think Kentucky, without it, wouldn't have been the same race. I don't think it would have been as good as what it was. I think it'd been really hard to pass without it. But I think that the ability to move up the racetrack and cars be able to go to the bottom and be about the same speed and be able to find clean air created a lot of passing, more passing than I thought there would be. So I thought that was a gain. So when you look at that and you look at how Pocono was without it, let's try to apply it and try something different. And we're going to learn as a team one thing, but I think as a sport we're going to learn what corners it used was the best. Maybe we need to apply it thicker in other corners than some. With 3 corners there, and maybe some need it more than others. I think so. How much does it wear out? How often do you reapply? We learn that as we race. There's no scientific, way of figuring that out until we race, really.
Mark Garrow, PRN. Along the same lines, Joey, what was the most disappointing or troublesome thing about the last race at Pocono? Most frustrating thing, I guess, for the drivers?
Couldn't pass. That's the most frustrating part. But like I said, I think this is going to be directionally better. I think it's definitely going to help the racing. So it should open the racetrack up. It should, if cars start to run the top more in the corners. It's going to allow, like I said, like Kentucky, you're going to be able to go to the bottom and find cleaner air, which will get you through the corner good, and that way the top and the bottom are comparable. Right now, you couldn't move up the racetrack. You wouldn't have anywhere to race. It's just there's no grip up there before. Now there should be grip up there to where you can go to the bottom and find air. So that's all good.
Were you surprised that the draft didn't work the way people thought it would, and passing would be a little bit easier at Pocono? People were predicting that we're going to see a lot of drafting and swooping and all this. It just never happened.
I wasn't too surprised by it, actually. I thought restarts were pretty crazy, and that's normal Pocono with those long straightaways when your restarts and the cars are already 2 wide and you go 3 wide and all that. That was all there like normal. That was just as chaotic as it usually is. But what I think we saw happen is just that bubble that we talk about behind the car. When you get to a certain point, a certain distance behind the car in front of you, you push that lead car ahead. That lead car actually has less drag than the trailing car. When you get to a certain point, that's what we need to try to fix, right? Because that's what you get the draft and then it stops. So if you're able to somehow continue that momentum to the back bumper of a car, you'll see more passing. So I think that'll be an adjustment for the cars in the future.
We'll come right down here to your left again, and then we'll go to Reed and then to the back.
All right, so Joey, you're obviously at the peak right now, but we have a couple other New England guys who are making their Cup debut this weekend. I know you're gonna kind of focus on yourself, but have you had an opportunity to touch base with Andy Sice or Elsa Terrio and talk to them about this opportunity that's before them this weekend?
I have not had a chance to talk to them. Honestly, I don't really know them that well. Maybe I know Austin a little better than Andy, but it is cool to see the New England guys get into this more and more. You think about these race teams, and I think it's a lot of people think of NASCAR's heritage as a southeastern sport. But man, you think of what kind of racers come out of New England. I think Dick Berggren's museum out there, the Northeast Motorsports Museum, really shows how really present motorsports is in the New England area. So it's special to be a part of that heritage. It's really cool to be able to see that and to see more. But you look at the race teams out here, there's a lot of crew guys that are from up here, that come from modified racing or just racing up in this area and whatever it may be. There's a lot. I mean, the majority of my team is from around here, not too far, and that's a lot of fun for us to be a part of.
Come down here to Reed.
Reed Spencer, NASCAR Wire. The history of this track says that if you're good here once, you're good here a number of times. I mean, there are 6 guys in the field that have won 3 races here. You and Clint have won a couple each. Is this a field track, kind of like Martinsville, where something clicks and you get it, and you're good pretty much all the time through generations of race cars and that sort of thing?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. This racetrack is one that, for me earlier in my career is the most frustrating track for me to go to, which always was awful because it's my home track and it's where you want to run the best, right? But for years, it was the most challenging track for me to get my head wrapped around. But like you said, there's tracks like New Hampshire or Richmond or Martinsville that seems like, and even Sonoma's a little bit like this, is once you get something that works and the driver and the team really understand what you need to be good, not just in practice, not just in qualifying, but in the race when you have a long run or trying to pass cars and what traffic and restarts are. And once you kind of figure out that balance, because it's never perfect here. It never drives the way you want it to. If it does for 3 laps, and then something goes wrong. Whether your front or your rear tires give up. So, trying to figure out that compromise here with this flat corners like that. It seems like once somebody gets their head wrapped around it and understands it, they get it for a while, and it doesn't matter if they're racing tricycles or cup cars out there. They have it figured out, and that's just kind of how this place is. And I still don't feel like I have it figured out by no means, but we get closer and closer to where we need to be.
And we'll wrap up in the back.
Hi, Joey, Rich Thompson, Boston Herald. It's kind of simplistic, but does defending the Cup title feel any different than chasing it?
I still feel like I'm chasing it, I guess is my answer to that. I think we accomplished the goal last year, and we're trying to accomplish the same goal this year. Doesn't make a difference whether we won or not last year. Our goal is the same this year. Still want to win the championship. So nothing new. Feel like we're in a better spot this year than we were last year at this point. We got more speed in our cars, got more playoff points, more wins. So, should have a few more wins, but overall the speed's there, and I think that's a key thing to think about right now. So we just got to continue that into the playoffs and have the run that we did last year through those 10 races.
All right, that'll wrap it up. Thanks, Joey.
All right,
Good
great.
luck
Thank
this
you.
weekend.